Oh, that's the wrong picture. Whoopsie.
Let's talk about amusement parks, like rides and rides in the dark. Rides right here and rides all over, but mostly coasters, mostly coasters. We'll talk about all kind of things, but mostly coasters.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Mario. This is a channel all about amusement park type stuff, but mostly coasters. And today I am joined by Drew from Parks Bros.
Hello.
He's going to be helping us out with this list where we're going to be talking about the top 10 overrated coasters. We did a top 10 underrated coasters video on his channel, so go head on over to Drew's channel and check that video out. I'll include the link in the description to that video as well. But yeah, without any further ado, haha.
I see what you did there, Mario. That was real clever.
Without any further ado, Drew, why don't you go ahead and kick things off. Go ahead and start us off by kicking things.
So we're gonna start this list off with a doozy, because I'm putting what many of you know is my number one coaster, and that is Steel Vengeance at number 10 on our overrated coasters list.
An RMC? Overrated? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I know, it's a little absurd to put what I think is one of the best coasters on the planet on an overrated list. Especially when in the past I've gone out and said this is the best coaster I've ever ridden. Now, Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point is legendary already with its 2-year career. I mean, what's not to love? A 200-foot tall RMC with the most airtime on any coaster ever? I mean, it is literally almost as perfect as you can get in many roller coaster enthusiast minds. But that's a huge reason why I see this ride as a little bit overrated, especially since a majority of enthusiasts I've talked to that have ridden this coaster hold this ride up on a pedestal and a higher standard than any other coaster they talk about, with many saying it blows Fury 325 out of the water, or it kicks X2's butt, or that it is undoubtedly the best coaster ever built, even though they've only ridden coasters in the states of Ohio, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. Now, I promise, I really do love this ride. But to be completely honest with you, if you were to take a good 3 or 4 elements out of this ride, I could personally see a couple coasters I've ridden beating this ride out in my overall rankings. I mean, heck, Maverick's right next door, and I gotta say, there are plenty of days I would take a ride on Maverick over Steel Vengeance. So, when I put this ride on an overrated coasters list, is that while Steel Vengeance is without a doubt one of the best coasters of all time, it doesn't need to be looked at like the Messiah.
The views and opinions expressed by Drew from Parks Bros do not reflect those of mostly coasters. Even though I'm of the exact same opinion, I would never admit it to you guys because I know you would roast me in the comments below. Please only direct your hate towards Parks Bros and not me. And for number 9, we're actually going to stick in Ohio. At number 9, we have Flight of Fear. This is one of the worst spaghetti bowl coasters that I've been on, and there's a couple reasons for that. One of the really cool things about spaghetti bowl coasters is that you can see the supports flying over your head. You have a lot of near misses. In the dark setting of Flight of Fear, you kind of miss out on that. It is cool that it is an indoor coaster and that it is dark, but at the same time, you can kind of see. It's just dark enough to not see the supports or the near misses, but light enough to actually still be able to see where you're going, kind of. Another thing that I don't love about this ride is it has a mid-course brake run, whereas the other 2 coasters of this model that I've been on actually do not. It really slows you down, and the second half of that ride doesn't really pick up until the corkscrew right at the end. All in all, I do think this is a really fun ride. I just don't think it's as good as people say it is, because this is a lot of people's favorite, and I personally, having been on multiple, I don't agree with that opinion.
Now, keeping within the theme that being in the dark doesn't automatically make a ride better, at least in Mario and I's opinion, number 8 is Space Mountain at Disneyland. Now, I know what you're thinking. Space Mountain's overrated? You mean the kiddie coaster at Disneyland? Yeah, I think so. And to be honest, it's not necessarily a kiddie ride. because, Disneyland's made for people of all ages. And technically speaking, it is one of the more intense rides at the resort. But just like Flight of Fear, this ride is in complete darkness, unless you're riding at night and your eyes have adjusted a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, this is another ride that I really love. But personally, I just don't see how many people think it's the best mountain at the park. I mean, you could argue it in ride experience, but then again, the ride experience is a bunch of right turns over and over and over again, and the only way you know the ride is ending is because you make a left turn, finally, after a minute of doing elongated helices? You know what I'm talking about. But I think the biggest reason I see this coaster as overrated is that in comparison to all of the other mountains at the park, the theming is incredibly limited. And while, yes, the opening hallway is epic and filled with lights, and there's even a nice projection on the second lift hill, everything from that point on is really just the coaster itself. And if your eyes have adjusted to the nighttime life of the park, well, you're going to be able to see everything, meaning the supports, the track, the other trains racing by. And while I actually personally prefer that type of experience with things to look at, it doesn't exactly help the narrative that the theming is very well done to space. But to be completely honest with you, this is my least favorite mountain. I think that's a mic drop.
All right, and now for number 7, we're actually going to go back outdoors. We have Top Thrill Dragster. Now, again, this is not a bad coaster. This is a really good coaster. Not even close to the best in the park, though, in my opinion. Even setting aside the fact that it has a really short ride time, that's not really my biggest problem with this thing. My biggest problem is that, number 1, the launch is not as forceful as a lot of other launch coasters. To me, it doesn't feel much different than an LSM launch. Obviously, if you're comparing it to something like Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm, that takes the cake by far. The second thing that I don't love about it, the top hat. I've ridden this coaster, I think 3 or 4 times, not gotten airtime on the top hat a single one of those times, having sat in the front, middle, and the back. Again, I'm going to bring up Accelerator just because that's an easy comparison. Accelerator, no matter where you sit, you're going to at least get good floater on the top hat. And front and back, you're going to get really great ejector. On Top Thrill Dragster, you get mild floater at best.
But what about the front, Mario? You gotta ride in the front. Have you ridden in the front? The front is so good.
Oh, okay. The front row. Yeah, it's great. You feel the speed way more in the front row, but is a coaster really that great if it's only incredibly good in one specific row? Oh, the twisting drop though. The twisting drop is really cool. You just, again, without airtime on a drop, normally I'd give a drop a pass if it doesn't have a ton of airtime, but when it's like one of 3 elements,
I can completely agree with that, Mario. But moving on to number 6, we're heading to the Lone Star State. That's right, Texas, for Six Flags Fiesta Texas and their B&M floorless coaster, Superman Krypton coaster. Now, I gotta admit, I was incredibly excited to ride this ride, because most of the things I've heard about it are absolutely amazing. The quarry wall interaction is very cool, and the layout overall looks really customized in comparison to many other B&M floorlesses from the same time period. Now, for as cool as all of that is, and with a lot of people I know saying it's the best floorless coaster in the country, that's where I have to disagree. Now, I will tell you, I love that first drop and turnaround, and the turnaround going up the quarry wall, but everything else feels exactly like every other floorless I've been on, except a little more jittery. Now, that's not normally a problem for me. If there's a little bit of shaking on a coaster, it doesn't really bother me. But for some reason, every time I've ridden Superman, I have come off of this ride with a massive headache. And I know a lot of people would say, well, the first half's really smooth and not the second. Well, for me, I start feeling that shake going down the first drop. And it doesn't seem to let up whenever I ride this coaster. And I've ridden in a couple of different rows at different seasons and at different times in the day. But for some reason or another, this ride for me just feels like a really shaky B&M floorless coaster. It's not even in the top half of floorlesses I've ridden.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that one. All right, If Steel Vengeance being the first thing on this list wasn't enough to make you click off the video, well, this just might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. We have another Cedar Point coaster for number 5, Raptor. Raptor is often touted to be one of the best B&M inverts, and while I think it is a really, really fun ride, it doesn't do anything better than any other B&M invert out there. Is it forceful? Absolutely. Is it a nice long ride? Yes. But these are all boxes that are checked by just about every other B&M invert out there. It doesn't even have like a particularly nice setting either. I much prefer something as simple as Silver Bullet just going over all of Knott's Berry Farm and down by the lake. If we're talking about an invert that's more forceful, I think Montu is more forceful in almost every aspect. Sure, it doesn't have the helix, but if we want to talk about a forceful helix, I'll go back to Silver Bullet. And the most intense part of that ride is the insane helix. If we want to talk about whippiness, this thing right here, Flight Deck at CGA, just as whippy, if not whippier. I mean, I do actually prefer Raptor to this, but if we're talking about anything that Raptor does specifically well, I don't think it beats out any other invert out there. I may have just gotten some of the slowest rides ever on it, but I just don't feel the same way about all the other people talking super, super highly about it. All right, they've definitely clicked away by now, right?
Yeah, there's no way they're still watching this. Oh, and speaking of which, we might as well just call this video How to Piss Off a Cedar Point Fanboy 101, because number 4 is Wicked Twister, the Intamin Impulse coaster, and this ride gets a little more praise than I think it should. Now, with this launch coaster going back and forth and up 205-foot tall spikes that twist, I can kind of see the appeal. Now, my first Intamin Impulse was V2, otherwise known as The Flash at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. And that one is very different because instead of going up 90 degrees on both sides, it has a 45-degree drawn-out roll, which makes the ride incredible for every single row that you're in. Now, Wicked Twister just doesn't really have that, at least in my experience with the ride. The launch wasn't anything to write home about, but it wasn't bad either. It was only when we started picking up speed that I realized something that I was afraid of, and that is an uncomfortable roughness. It didn't really give me a headache or anything, but it was just a slight shake that made me rethink my decision to ride. But soon we started heading up both of those spikes, and I was hoping for some major twistiness, getting flung to the side, and just having all out fun. Well, we made it to the twist 1.5 times maybe, and the one time we actually did, I got a nasty punch to the jaw from the over-the-shoulder restraint. Now, beside that, it just felt like a shaky version of a pirate swing. And while the launch was nice, and the interesting twistiness gave me a different experience, you could say, I honestly thought this ride was quite boring. And I don't normally say that about rides, and I hate talking about these wonderful creations in a bad light, but sadly, there have been a handful of rides that I have personally ridden that I have just been straight up bored with, and Wicked Twister is definitely near the top of that list.
But now we're going to take things away from Cedar Point, so we at least won't be offending any of the Cedar Point fanboys out there, because number 3 on this list is Iron Rattler.
Bruh, what the frick? What, how you freaking, how could you put Iron Rattler on this list? It's stupid.
Hey, nobody asked you. This is my video. It almost pains me to say it because, again, this is a really good ride. It's better than all the other rides I've talked about on this list. But that just goes to show you how much enthusiasts can overhype rides. But straight out the gate, the first thing that I have a problem with is the drop off of the quarry wall. I had heard from just about anybody that has been on this ride that is one of the best, if not the single best airtime moment on any coaster ever. And it's really good, but I mean, I've had stronger airtime on at least 20 other coasters. I also don't think that there is much else going for the ride either. It has a fantastic first drop, I will give it that. It's one of my favorite first drops. but most of the elements are relatively tame compared to other elements on other RMCs that aren't as widely praised. Interestingly enough, the one part about this ride that actually did exceed my expectations is a part of the ride that most people actually aren't the biggest fan of. The entire section on top of the wall after the inversion has some of the best airtime on the ride. I could totally see if this ride is running slow, how, I guess, boring even that top section could be. So yeah, my opinions on this ride are just completely the opposite of what everybody else's are. Overall, I just think it gets way too much hype for what it is. But yeah, there you go. Sorry, Drew.
Apology not accepted. But anyway, moving on to number 2, we have what I consider the most overrated coaster I've ever been on, and that has to be Wicked at Lagoon. Man, I gotta say, this straight up is one of the most boring and just uncomfortable ride experiences I've ever personally had. And especially over the past year, all I've heard is constant praise of this ride, with some people even putting it above Cannibal in the park. Now, I gotta be honest with you, out of the 10 coasters there, this is by far one of my least favorites, and is one of my least favorites of all time. Now, how could I say that? It has a vertical launch moment and a 90-degree drop. Yeah, but what else does it have? An overbank turn? Okay, sure. A 0G roll? Alright. A mid-course brake run. Some turns. Yeah, no. That just doesn't seem to hit the spot for me. Now, while some people might say the launch going vertical is an amazing feeling that you can't get anywhere else, to me, it didn't feel revolutionary at all. It just felt like I was going up a 90-degree spike. And coming down didn't really give me any airtime, which is fine. And normally I wouldn't complain about stapling, because being secure on a coaster doesn't really negate airtime. Sure, you might not be able to physically float out of your seat, but you can still get pulled up by negative G-forces in a way that's super enjoyable. But with Wicked, all I can say is that it's pure pain. This restraint, for some reason or another, is the shape of a rectangle that doesn't really conform to a body shape. And that especially doesn't help when it's got a hard, straight line going straight into your hips and stomach. Yeah, for me, this ride is just plain out overrated, and is a coaster that I'm legitimately puzzled to see so many people love so much.
I just noticed that that's been the wrong picture this whole time. Well, too late to change it now. Well, not really. I'll go ahead and change it. Who cares? There you go. What is this video? Number 1, we have The Beast. And this really shouldn't come as much of a surprise to anybody that has watched my channel. If this were a ride that nobody talked about and wasn't hyped up by the night rides, then I wouldn't be on this list. But this is still, to this day, some people's favorite wooden coasters. To touch a little bit more on the night ride aspect of this, I have not gotten a night ride. But also, to jump back to what I said about Top Thrill Dragster, a ride should not have to be good in a specific set of circumstances. Now, are most coasters better at night, or at least later in the day when they've had a chance to warm up? Absolutely. But I've heard so many people say this thing is only good at night. So it's not a good ride then. That's like saying, what is that like? Let me think of a good analogy real quick. You want to talk about The Beast? I'm trying to think of an analogy. People say The Beast is only good at night.
That's like saying my car starts every other day, so it's still a great car.
There you go. Thank you. And I feel like other than the night ride stuff, we already know all the flaws with The Beast. You know, no airtime, which yes, airtime is not the only thing about a coaster. But yeah, I could go on and on for days about The Beast. I have an entire 20-something minute video on it. For the sake of not making this video any longer than it already is, that's going to do it for this one. Again, huge thanks to Drew from Parks Bros for helping me out with this video. Drew, you got anything to add?
Make sure to come check out our list of top 10 underrated coasters over on my channel, Parks Bros. And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe and go follow us on Instagram. And huge thanks to Mario for having me on.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Go ahead and give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, 2 thumbs down if you didn't like it. That way I know you didn't like it. Otherwise, how am I gonna know? Make sure to subscribe for more content like this, turn on notifications, and share the video if you're feeling extra fancy. And with all that being said, this is the end of the video.